Whether your beer is in a bottle, can, or glass, kick back and relax. It's Better on Draft.
We are live. It is episode number, there we go, 53 of the Michigan Craft Beer Series. My name is Ken. Thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate it. It is December 20th. We are getting right into the holiday season. It's almost over, actually. So let's see what everyone's drinking to help reduce the stress that is their current credit card account. Let's start with Rob. Rob, what do you got?
Today I am drinking Delicate Dreamer from Branch and Bone out of Dayton, Ohio. It is a red velvet cake stout. It is also the 20th beer on my advent calendar.
All right. Oh, I guess that makes sense. It is the 20th of the month. Wendy, what do you got?
I am drinking an Old Nation Frandor Claus, which was their beer that went towards the Greater Lansing Food Bank this year.
All right. For myself, I have got one of my favorite beers out there. That is the Mean Old Tom from Maine Beer Company. And if I get to it, I do have a Puppy Slumber Party from Metazoa to drink that down with. We do have a guest with us in studio as I am leaving the show after next week's episode. I decided to properly curate my final guests, which I had to bring in our friend Kevin DeGrood from formerly North Central Brewing. Hello, how are you, and what are you drinking?
How's it going, guys? All right, I had to pull this one out of the cellar here. This is our Belgian triple painkiller that we had up until the very end. Went from start to finish, the only beer that went start to finish on our menu. So I thought it was appropriate to bust one out.
Wasn't Nice Bloobs and You're My Boy Blue, wasn't that a start to finish beer, just a different name?
You mean this one? This is a vintage can too. This is the one we got in trouble for. Yeah, that was it. It was a beer that we brought on tap the fall of 2015, while Painkiller was on the menu right from the start. Although we didn't call it Painkiller at the beginning, but that recipe was on from the start.
Well, I appreciate you coming on to talk about what's probably a little bit of a sensitive conversation. We know you've actually done one other show, which is How Not to Start a Damn Brewery, featuring former guest of Better on Draft, Kelly Meyer. Go check out that episode from earlier this year. But let's at least get a status update. How are you doing?
I'm good. That was definitely a good opportunity for me to reprioritize things in my life. So in general, I'm doing well. Family's good. I miss a lot of my beer peeps, but I have been keeping tabs on a lot of you guys. So it's definitely bittersweet to re-enter a realm like this one, but revisiting old friends is always a good thing.
Do we get to know what happened to the equipment? Because you guys had a nice setup with all the bright tanks over there, and
Sure.
Where is its new home? Was it adopted?
So that's a good question. Half of it's still sitting in a storage facility in Indianapolis, where the company that removed it for us, they're also the company that sells it for us. So if anyone's listening that's looking for a nice 7-barrel brew house, steam jacketed system, we still have one available. Some of the tanks, they've kind of gone all over the country. The someone here, someone there, and so yeah, it's we haven't even sold it all yet, which is probably a good indication of how difficult the market is right now. There's some here and some there, and some still not sold.
Well, obviously you and I have kept in touch here and there over the last couple months, 9 months or so since you have left the business itself. My first, you mentioned yesterday that you did a speech over at Schoolcraft.
Yep.
Regarding the beer industry and what's going on. Obviously, we had such a epic rise to what the current beer industry is, what do you see that maybe we as fans of the industry are not necessarily seeing?
Sure. So yeah, and my apology. I guess I was supposed to send it over to you so you'd have some talking points. But no, it was a not too heavy of a presentation. I pulled some statistics from Brewers Association, from some other key marketing websites and things like that, where the craft beer industry is in a tough spot right now. You have the emergence of so many other alcohol options, as well as lots of people that aren't drinking anymore for various reasons. And then we're also dealing with the crowd that is now just turning 21. I don't remember what their name is, but that class, that whatever they're called, there's a lot of people that aren't choosing to drink at all. It's not like, oh, I'm just drinking one thing. They're just not drinking. So there's a lot of challenges that are on the horizon, and I think some of the key indicators against craft beer. 2023 was the first year in United States history that liquor outsold beer in total in the U.S. So that's something that was different. It had never happened before. And then in Michigan specifically, they had a good graphic that was pulled off the Brewers Association website that showed the amount of closures versus openings over the last, 20 years or so. And generally speaking, the amount of openings far outweigh the number of closings. And 2023 and 2024, 2024 especially, it was partially updated because obviously 2024 hasn't closed yet. But 2024 will be the first year that in Michigan in the last 20 years, the number of closings outpaced the number of openings. So definitely a tough time. But yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, and there's plenty of breweries that are still crushing it. But yeah, it's definitely more difficult than it was 10 years ago.
Before I pass it to Rob, my question to you, and this is going to kind of get to the heart of it, but what happened with North Center? What was the nail in the coffin? I know obviously COVID was probably a big hit, changing all the restrictions, having to do investment and that kind of stuff. But I mean, it's been a few years since COVID. So was it just like a slow death by 1,000 paper cuts? What happened with North Center?
Sure. I think for me, the downturn started in early 2023. That was when you saw inflation spike. Inflation changing is not abnormal, and it's not something that is new to the economy, but it was the rate that inflation went up in early 2023. So it went up so fast. You started seeing people changing their spending behavior very quickly, and that kind of has taken hold throughout 2023. We saw spending way down. Expectations changed. If you are, taking your family out to a place, it's much more difficult to execute if you don't have a complete menu. If you're not including food, if you don't have other non-beer options, that became more of a challenge for us. We offered cider and allowed people to bring in wine, but again, it's all about convenience when you're talking. Okay, if I have my $100 that I'm looking to spend on my family, I want something that everyone's going to enjoy. I don't want to worry about leaving anyone out when we are ordering, right? So you generally spend your money at places that can bring you the whole package. So we definitely lost some consumers from that. We also, in our specific town, Northville isn't a very big town, and we did have a new brewery open up, Great White Buffalo, in March of 23. And even though it definitely brought in people that wanted to see both breweries, your day-to-day business, that pie is only a certain size, and they were the new guys in town, and they took a big chunk from us as well. And then when we got into late 2023 and early 24, for me personally, it was really taking a toll on, I lost some very key people in 2023, people that had been with me basically from the start. They decided to leave the industry, pursue new careers and that kind of thing. My general manager, Nate, and one of my brewers, Cody, they both left the industry and had been with me since the beginning. So you lose, your right and your left hand kind of at the same time. And it's really hard. Everyone knows how hard it is to find labor, let alone labor that you trust. And so that kind of forced me back into being more hands-on as an owner. And when you're going through a downturn, and even though you know what you might be able to do to get things corrected, that's when the nail in the coffin for me. I can't tell you the exact moment in time, but I noticed in early 2024, I was really struggling to want to fix things. You're trying to get excited about different things, and I started losing that fire, and that's when I knew that it was probably time to start thinking about changing directions. So you throw financial stress, not being able to deliver the product that we wanted to, when you're dealing with labor issues and trying to maintain kitchen staff and continuity and things like that, it's really hard to execute a product that people deserve. And so all of those things combined put me in this situation where I thought it was a good opportunity to call it a day.
Yeah. So back in 2020, the brewery near me closed down, and it sounds like, so it obviously wasn't exactly the same. For one thing, they had only been open for about 2 years, but their brew panel broke very early in that being open, and they fixed it a few times, but it just kept breaking, and I'm pretty sure it was the wiring in the building and such. But yeah, the head brewer there, he lost the love for the game because he was spending all his time fixing that panel so he could brew beer.
Yep.
And that's not why he was doing it. So yeah, I feel that when you're stuck doing the bits that you didn't actually sign up to do.
Yeah,
It's hard
I
to
can
get
assure
that
you
love.
that when I did my business model back in 2012, there was no slide that I put together that said I would be pulling 3 to 4 shifts in the kitchen a week, 9 years into the business. So that those kinds of parts get left out, and it's definitely can be a different. It puts your focus a little bit different, for sure.
So I'm not familiar with North Center. I'm Rob, new guy out of Indianapolis. It's nice to meet you. I hear you're an old time friend of the show, so nice to meet you. But were you guys on shelves in the area and all? Was distribution affected, and was the big boys buying up all the shelf space in liquor stores in the area? Was that affecting you too?
Yeah, so we definitely we had a distribution footprint, and we were a self-distributing brewery, so that's already a difficult challenge. And was our shelf space affected? Yes. It was not because of big breweries. It was because people were buying less beer. Period.
Okay.
And so, your smaller to mid-level breweries, which is where that was the category we fit into. You're the ones to go first. You don't have product recognition, and so that's what makes it really hard to stay on the shelf when things take a turn for the worse. So that was definitely, we saw struggles in distribution, but distribution was not the quote unquote moneymaker for us. It was our pub, and that was where we were struggling the most. So that's what ultimately led to the decision to close, is when your pub isn't executing at the level that you want to, and you don't want to fix it. That's not a good combination. So,
Right.
And I say that, I don't mean that I didn't try. It just means that the drive to do it, when you're, again, we were just shy of being open for 9 years, and we navigated COVID, which everyone knows how difficult that was and is, and people are still reeling from that. And we were actually supposed to move into a new spot, and COVID threw a wrench in that. And when I say move into a new spot, it wasn't, we had this idea and we nixed it. No, on March 13th, 2020, which was a Friday, we pulled permits to start demolition work that was supposed to begin on Monday, March 16th of 2020. And if anyone remembers, in Michigan, since you said you were from Indy, I'm sure it was similar in Indiana, but in Michigan, March 16th, 2020 was the first day of 2 weeks to slow the spread, I think was the original phrase. So we were everything was shut down, and it stayed that way for about 3.5 months. And I mean, I had crews coming in that were supposed to do work, and then construction was paused and everything paused. And by the time everything restarted, like I said, about 3.5 months later, our project that went from about a 4 to 5 month build out at the cost of $420,000 went to 7 to 8 months minimum, and it was starting to approach 7 figures for the exact same build out. So it was definitely disheartening. So you navigate, then you have to navigate this pandemic, which no one really knew what to do or how to do it or anything like that, because we've never done it before. And we have to do that in the space that we were trying to exit. we were done with that space and we were ready to go into the new one, and then we had to cancel that project. So COVID was hard for us for many reasons, and that wasn't necessarily where the things started for us, though, because for us, 2022 was actually the best year we put on the books across the board. And did we feel the effect of people coming back and spending money? Yes. But we thought, that's what made 2023 even more difficult, was we thought we were over the hill. We were over the mountain finally. And no, all we were over the smaller mountain looking up the taller mountain.
Right.
So, that's what made it pretty disheartening was, and hindsight's 2020, right? It was probably a blessing in disguise that we didn't get this new space, because then we would have had to navigate the pandemic with this new space. Would it have been successful, and we would have had more debt on our hands? So you can look at it both ways, but the other half of the glass is, well, that could have been the springboard to great success too. So, it was a bummer all around. But again, we were able to navigate through it, and we had some fun doing it. We did a lot of fun virtual things, but that was everyone knows it was a weird year, but it was 2020 was a very weird year to be in a restaurant type of business.
Yeah. Well, so rather than harp on it anymore, I'd like to hear about some of the fun times at North Center. Are there any great beers or great release parties that you remember? Anything that you really look forward to?
So, Ken mentioned it a few minutes ago, but I held up. It just happened to be sitting on my desk, but this is the original. Sorry, I have the blur on. The Nice Bloobs, which was a blueberry amber ale that we released every August, September timing. And at first, it was not meant to be a beer that was turned into a seasonal flagship for us. It was a beer that my buddy, when we first opened, him and I were the original brewers. Drew came up with this recipe because he thought fruit and amber ale was unique. We were just looking for unique. We weren't even necessarily looking for anything gimmicky, or anything like that. And the name, actually, we went back and forth on the name because we were at the fall 2015 beer festival in Detroit, and my buddy Drew, I had named the beer Nice Bloobs, and he was, I don't know, it's tacky, I don't know if I like it. And so I'm like, all right, we'll just change it, because at the time there's a lot more rules now in place about just changing a beer name on a whim. So we erased it and wrote "You're My Boy Blue," like referencing old school. And about 2 booths down from us was Batch Brewing, and they had also just opened pretty recently. That was their first festival, and they had created a beer that was brewed by, at their time, their all-woman brewer team, and they made the Dick Smasher, and that was what they released. So Drew sees this on their board, walks back to our board, erases "You're My Boy Blue," and writes nice bloobs in there, and it became a thing. And then where it really sprung it was the following year. We released it again because it sold well. And right across the street from us, there's a Kroger shopping, a Kroger store. And there was a stop for this, the Susan G. Komen 60-mile walk that they raised money for breast cancer awareness. And they had like a station set up right across the street from us. So I at one point went over and just handed out some coupons. Hey, you guys are sitting here. Why don't you come over to the brewery when you're done? And they brought like 30 people into the brewery. And when they saw that there was a beer called Nice Blues, it changed the dynamic of everything, because they thought it was amazing that we were celebrating something that's near and dear to that group of people. So they ran with it, and they got us in touch with Susan G. Komen Foundation, and we made a dual release for that point on. So every time we released it, we partnered with Susan G. Komen, donated part of the proceeds to their foundation, and it just grew and grew and grew. And so for us, that was our best. Every year, that was our best sales day. That was Bloob's release day, and it grew into a fun thing. And that was always a good day. And once we incorporated our kitchen, we're doing specials that we got this blueberry jam hot wing sauce, and we got this burger that's got blueberry spread on it with blue cheese, and you keep going with it. And it was a fun day. It was always a fun day. And it was the one beer that we had. As a small brewery, you always dream of the line out the door and everyone clamoring for your product. That was the one that we had. We had that one. So it was always a good day for us and a fun day.
So speaking of lines, how do you feel about line shares and on your property?
So, I mean, for me, I could care less. Like, I understand that there's, some places take it more seriously, and it really just depends on your local enforcement, to be quite honest. We had a good rapport with Northville PD. Maybe we bent rules here and there, but as long as we weren't causing problems, they didn't bother us. I never had any issues with them. And so it just depends on who your local enforcement is and how much they'd come down on you if they saw people drinking in the parking lot. I mean,
yeah,
that happened all the time anyway. Like, it could be a regular Saturday afternoon, and a group of people roll up and they just came from another brewery and they're polishing off whatever beer they had from. I mean, it happened all the time. So I mean, if people were getting upset about that, then I was just happy to have a line, so I didn't care about all the other stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Bloobs brought everyone together. They're wonderful.
It absolutely did. And we had our fair share of criticism for the name especially once it took off a little bit, and it was quite interesting when you become an internet sensation, in quotes, for a day. The people can get nasty, but you just got to remember what really matters are the people that are paying for your product and supporting you in your pub. And we always had a good support system, and they knew what the real story was. It wasn't just a bunch of dudes in flannels coming out with a product that's sexualized women. No, it was a product that we had a funny name to it because it was with blueberries, and it was something that we always said when we were in college. We said the word bloobs all the time, and so it meant something to us. And then you get the Susan G. Komen Foundation behind it, and it was something that was, now you're using this thing that you made that you thought was funny can also be a good thing as well. So, I know there's always people that, well, if you have a good enough product, you don't need to have a funny name. And those people are probably also, that's, I equate that to, when basketball players say, my old coach said you should never dunk, but that's probably because he couldn't dunk. That's what I equate it to. You just must not have ever had fun with beer. If you think that it's just got to be a good product and it'll sell itself. At one point that was probably true, but not when there's 430 breweries.
Right. Yeah, there's a place near here called Bad Dad Brewing that I love their beer names. One of my favorites is Tapestry of Obscenities. I'm sure I bring that up a lot. But I just think names like that are wonderful, and they will definitely make me reach for a can.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. Like you're just trying to make a product that garnishes his attention, because when you're a small brewery, no one knows who you are, and you're looking for any way to grab anyone's attention. I mean, think about the average consumer. They walk into a store and there's 1,000 bottles or cans, in the store, and they're not basing, and they don't know who any of these places are, and they just are looking for, what sounds good. Like, okay, that beer style sounds good to me, I want to try it, or that name's funny. That's usually the two things that people do when they're in the store. Or that can label is pretty cool. Like that's what they're looking for. That's how you separate yourself. So from my perspective, it was always fun. We had a good time coming up with names for our beer. Some of them had stories, some of them didn't, but that was a fun part of the job.
Yeah, I've got another one before I attempt to pass it off to Wendy, but I'm curious. So you've talked about brewing with blueberries, but are there other ingredients that you particularly enjoyed brewing with, or didn't enjoy brewing with? Are there other things you put in there?
I mean, the biggest, any brewery should tell you this, but the biggest pain in the butt to brew are hazy beers. It smells great, they're the hop aromas that are coming out, but from a pure business perspective, they're a terrible beer to make, because when you add hops at that rate to a beer, they're like a sponge and they soak up some of your product. So you make, your vessels can only hold so much. And when your yields, if I spend the same amount of labor to make 7 barrels of a lager, and I spend that same amount of labor to make the volume of 7 barrels of hazy IPA, but the yield is only 5.5, that hurts your product. And not to mention the amount of hops that you're putting in there are expensive. And they're very difficult to execute well, and they take up a lot of effort and money. And so they're a must have at almost every tap room. Their best selling beer is probably their hazy IPA, and it doesn't matter if you like them or not. So that was probably the beer that you had the love-hate relationship. You watch it get made, and you're like, oh, this is costing so much money. And then it goes into the vessel, and it starts coming out the taps, and people are ordering it 6 or 7 at a time. And it's like, okay, all right, that's why we do it. But the beers that I enjoyed making the most, the Painkiller I enjoyed making, just because that actually was one of my original homebrew recipes. And to watch it grow over time and get better, and it always smelled good. We put honey in there, and it always smelled good on brew day. And then when we get to Christmas season, we always last few years we did this. It was probably the best day at the brewery in a given year. We did the flight before Christmas, and we created six. It started with 6 beers. It morphed into 4, so people could take 4 packs home. But we always designed 4 or 6 beers that had Christmas overtone to them. And when you're making those beers, you're brewing with spices and ginger and cinnamon, and everything always smelled really good. And so when we were making those were always. And plus, it's the holidays when you're brewing and it's early in the morning. You got a nice snowfall coming down. It was a nice. I always liked those brew days.
Well, speaking of things that you like to brew, is there a style that you didn't get to brew that you would really hope to be able to do again one day?
Oh man, I mean, I'm sure there was a style that we didn't cover at some point, but um, my brewer Cody, when she started getting on her own, and then back to this COVID thing really quick. We had hired a brewer, Alexio. He now works at Drafting Table, and his first day was also March 16th, 2020, when he was supposed to start with us. And the two of them over the course. So what we did over COVID to generate revenue is we had them brewing one or two small batches. When I say small batches, I'm like, it was my homebrew setup that they were using 2 to 3 times a week, and we were just churning out these weird ass beers that they would make over and over and over again, like whatever they could think of. I was like, just do it, and we'll come up with a funny name, and we had a generic label, and we'll just write on the can, and we'll sell it. That will be what we sell that week, and that actually worked out really well for us because it generated interest in a time where that was difficult. But we covered everything. We even I remember Cody pitched to me brewing a sati, which it's a very distinct style of beer, specifically for the yeast style that you need to use. You're basically taking a lager yeast and fermenting it at ale yeast temperatures, and you use this wooden ring that they used to store, and the yeast would grow on it, and they throw it in the batch, and they reuse it over and over again. And it's this old Scandinavian style. And I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And I consider myself to be a pretty well-rounded beer geek. And she threw this at me. I'm like, just make it. I'm sure it'll be fine. And it was. It was cool. It was engaging. People were asking about it. What does this mean? We could tell the story. And it was maybe within 3 months of her making that it one of the beer magazines, one of the national publications, don't remember which one, on the front cover it said Sati, the up and coming style ? And it was like, no way, we were the first ones to bring it back. And so yeah, I would say there's not a beer that we didn't touch. It didn't seem like we always had weird stuff going. We had traditional stuff going. I was actually always proud of our spread that we would have on our board at most given times. So, from the perspective of, was there anything I wish I brewed? I don't know if I can't say that I have that. But we did a good job, I think, of trying to do just about anything we could to figure out a way to get a good product to the customer.
So I was a little sidetracked at the beginning with my grandma. What are you homebrewing still, or are you getting to brew on a commercial level at all?
Say that again.
Are you homebrewing still? Are you getting to brew on a commercial level at all? I missed it.
No. I'm personally not gonna. I might get back into home brewing, but brewing is it's going to be really hard for me to go back to home brewing when you brew on a commercial system. I'll say that much. And that's simply because with home brewing, you just do not have the checks and balances to make a good beer. You just don't. And I'll enjoy. The good news is I have plenty of friends that still do this, and I can always pop it on a brew day at their place. I think I'll be okay with not getting back into home brewing necessarily, but I'm not going to rule it out either.
I personally suck at home brewing. I can't get my beer to ferment. It's killing me. I've tried 3 times now. I need to have somebody come in and actually just show me how to do it step by step.
Yeah, and that's the problem with home brewing is that like I said, that you're using plastic buckets, you're using tubes, I know there's very serious home brewers out there that have stainless steel equipment, and they got pumps and valves and things that you would see in a commercial setup. That's not the average home brewer. The average home brewer's got the 5-gallon Gatorade bucket. They got a couple 5-gallon plastic buckets, and they're mixing stuff up, and we're having my buddy's home brew, and yeah, it generally tastes terrible. the when we were home brewing and the original, like back before we opened the brewery up, one of the original thoughts of opening a brewery happened because someone I did not know. We were serving an Irish stout at my buddy's St. Patrick's Day party 15 years ago, 14 years ago. And someone that I didn't know who was at the party had it and said, "This is really good. Have you ever thought about doing this commercially?" That was the first time that I had that thought got put in my head, was because someone I didn't know gave me praise. Usually it's your buddies. "Oh yeah, your home brew is great." And then when you give it to someone who knows what they're doing, it tastes like shit. So, it was good to get some validation from someone I didn't know. And that person ended up being our startup lawyer who helped us start up our business. So it all comes full circle, I guess.
Nice.
But yeah, I don't know if I'm going to get back into home brewing. We'll see. I like watching other people do it now.
That's what I always say. I'm really good at drinking beer. I like to taste it.
For me, it was a friend who gave me high praise for the homebrew, but it went beyond that. It was more, he said, my wife and I like to invest in business startups. Would you like to start a brewery? We will invest in it. And so, like, that's legit praise where they're actually going to give you money to do
Right.
it.
Yes. When someone says, I will give you money to do this. That means they believe in you and they believe in what you're doing for sure.
I'm sure all of my beer has gone downhill since then, but
Well, yeah, as Ken mentioned earlier, you should listen to my podcast on how not to start a brewery or why you shouldn't. Don't do it now. Don't do it now.
So, on that note, give a little bit of advice to those of us who haven't touched that, that might be considering it, because we do have listeners that have talked about it.
I think I lost you there.
Can you distill some advice into some nuggets of wisdom for some of our listeners who might be wanting to start a brewery?
Yeah. Well, I know I painted a picture of doom and gloom. That's definitely more relevant in Michigan right now. We just have a big. We have a lot of breweries, and that type of saturation is definitely not helpful. With that said, though, it's there are plenty of breweries that are doing well. I think what it really comes down to is that when we opened in 2015, that was a big boom year in Michigan. We went from my license in the state of Michigan was 151. We were the 151st microbrewery license that the state of Michigan had issued. So from 1989, when they issued number one, all the way to April 15th, 2015, they issued number 151. Then between the day we opened, April 15th, 2015, till now, there's 430. So they went from 151 to 430 in under 10 years. When they went up to 151, took them the better part of almost 3 decades. So you had a really big boom, and it was right around between late 2014 and mid 2016. That's when most of the breweries and people that I'm friends with, we all opened at the same time. Okay, in our immediate area, we had it was us, Ascension, Dearborn Brewing, Canton Brew Works, Drafting Table, Draft Horse Brewing, and that was just in like a 10-mile radius, right? 15-mile radius. And beyond, you go beyond that, there's even more and more and more. And so there was a lot of breweries that opened up in a small period of time. And that boom or saturation is at the time. So you had all these new breweries open, right? And we're all learning at the same speed, same time. Some breweries did better than others. And if you're opening a brewery now, all those breweries that opened 10 years ago have 10 years on you to make a good beer. So that means your window, and in that 10 years, the customer also got smarter and more choosy. So in that 10 years, your window of how long it takes you to make a good product is a lot smaller. When we opened, I would say, like looking back, I can be honest with myself now. I don't think we had what I would consider to be really good beer, especially knowing what we had when we closed, until we were open for about 2 years. And that's just because we were learning. We didn't know anything about commercial brewing, and as we learned. But our support and our consumer was forgiving to that, whether it was because they liked us or because they didn't know better or because of whatever the reason is. Our window is much larger now. That window is tiny. You have maybe months to figure it out now, and if you can't, you're going to be left for dead. So that's if I give out a piece of advice, if you're going to open right now, don't be, I'm homebrew guy, I'm going to do it. No, you got to hire someone who knows what the fuck they're doing. If I had to do it all over again, that would be something that I would have probably put more effort into, is finding someone that had experience with production brewing and could have shown us the ropes, even if it was a consulting role, and shrunk our window of learning. So that's definitely something that breweries need. And then I also think the days of operating a brewery without a kitchen are gone. I know there are plenty of breweries out there that succeed with that business model. I just think if you're a new brewery and you open with that business model, I no longer think it can be successful. There's, again, the expectations of what the customer wants when they go out is different now. And you need to have a kitchen, and it can't just be, hey, we're going to put some pizzas in the oven and dish them out. It's got to be more complex than that. You have to take it to the next level and work with your beers and incorporate them into the menu. And I think that's something that, again, when you are, and most of us that opened up breweries, we were homebrew guy. Homebrew guy does not think that way. We just wanted to make beer for everybody. Why can't I just make beer? So my advice is, if you're a homebrew guy and you want to open up a brewery, why don't you go work at one first, right? And get some knowledge. And then you might also find out that it's not as glamorous as you think. That's another thing that I wish more people, including myself, did, was getting production brewing experience, learning that, but also the kitchen aspect, I think, is critical now.
I hope that you hear yourself, because obviously you're no longer that homebrew guy. You now have, you have business savvy. You seem to understand the market. You seem to understand like all of the operations aspect of it too, like so much more than just brewing.
Yeah, it goes way beyond that, right? And it sounds obvious, right? Like, you're going to be running a business now. You're not just making beer. You got to be HR guy. You got to be IT guy. You got to be marketing guy. You got to be, sales guy. You got to be the guy that's cleaning the urinals. You got to be the guy that's, you're doing it all, because you can't afford to pay a bunch of people to do it for you. That's just something that, when you're writing up a business model, those are all things that can't be described. And what is your value of your time? That is something that is completely underestimated by every small business owner ever in history. And I am no exception to that. I lost a lot of time with my family and friends because I was working at the brewery in addition to my day job, which I still have. That's something that I think a lot of people severely underestimate, is the amount of time that they will spend at their business, because they're not going to be able to afford to pay people to do every single thing that requires a business to function. And we were a small business too, right? Like at most, I think I had maybe 15 employees at like my peak. So like, that's not a lot of people, it's not compared to other small businesses or breweries that are also considered small businesses that have 80 employees, 100 employees, whatever the number is. And so, you really have to know that there's going to be lots of things that aren't on that piece of paper when you are thinking about your business model early on. Are you going to be okay with closing the bar down at midnight or whenever it is you close and cleaning puke out of a urinal? Will you be ready for that? Because I was a big proponent of not making my staff do anything that I hadn't already done or wouldn't do myself. So, I was always, trying to be the person that showed them what to do and did all of the stuff that maybe a normal person wouldn't want to do. But it that helped garnish the attitude of my employees of I want to say, if there's anything I could pat myself on the back for of 9 years of being open, it was my employees had loyalty to me. I had several employees that worked at the brewery for a very long time. And I think that is because we cultivated a work environment that people enjoyed. And I think that goes a long way. But that's not something that you can plan for or expect. Like it's impossible to say, oh yeah, I'm just going to go out and get a general manager that'll do it all for me. Oh yeah, you're just gonna grow on the general manager tree. Like, you don't just go and get someone that knows how to do that. You have to, and not, like I said this at the beginning, I mentioned it briefly, not only finding a person who's competent, but finding a competent person that you trust. That's a way different animal. And I learned a good lesson along, like, maybe it was a year or two with an opening. My buddy that is one of the owners of Rockford Brewing, Jeff, he's the brewer there. Awesome dude. When Third Nature Brewing opened in Rockford, so they had another brewery that opened in their small town. And I asked him, I'm like, we were at the Brewers Conference, having beers, having dinner. And I said, hey, are you worried about this other brewery and you losing, employees to that brewery? And he said, I mean, yeah, but if they're offering something better than what I can give them, then they should go take it. These are not people, that are tools in my toolbox. They are people that are trying to have a career and feed their family and all that kind of stuff. I don't hold anything personally if someone's trying to make themselves better or do anything like that. And as soon as he said that, like, a light clicked in my head, and I was like, okay, yeah, that never take it personally when someone leaves your place. Even when you're a small business and your family, it's hard to see someone go, even if it's like a part-time server that, but it was someone that you saw a couple of days a week for a year, and now they're going to leave because they want a different job or they don't want to do that anymore, or whatever the case may be. It's hard to not take it personally because it's your business and your passion, but that's exactly what you have to do, is not take it personally. They were just trying to better their lives, and it had nothing to do with you. And so he put things in a different perspective just by saying that one thing. I can't even tell you if he remembers that conversation that we had, but I remember it. So it was important for him to say that, and how he said it, and how he viewed his employees. And that's a reason why they're a successful brewery, is because of that attitude.
In the Twitch chat, kind of expanding from something you said maybe about 10 minutes ago or so. In Savannah, Jordan says only one brewery has a kitchen. Most support or host food trucks. Do you think that is a sufficient alternative to having an on-premise kitchen?
Yeah. So we had when we first opened, our kitchen aspect didn't open until about 2 years after we were open. So we operated for 2 years without a kitchen, from 2015 to 2017. We did the route of food trucks, bringing in catering company, whatever it may be. So first of all, it depends on what the local laws are. Food truck laws are always changing. And in Michigan, it pretty much comes down to the city that you're in. There are some cities that are very hard on food trucks and where they can park and what they can do and what kind of licensing they need. Northville was not difficult, but the problem is a food truck. That's their business, right? It's their business on wheels, and they're going to go wherever they can make the most money for their business. And a lot of times my small brewery was not that option, and we got cancellations last minute a lot. And so it seems obvious from the outside that, yeah, just get a food truck and they can be your food guy. if you ask other breweries that have tried this, there are some that have had success with it in our area. The two that I can think of that come to mind are Drafting Table and Copper Hop. Neither of those places have a kitchen, and they are both supported by food trucks, and they are both very successful with those food trucks and keeping those food trucks at their location. I will say that even the successful ones still deal with last-minute cancellations from time to time, truck breaks down, whatever the reason is. But we did not have good success with food trucks, and it was because my place was smaller, and churning 80 to 90 to 100 people through the doors on a daily basis was just not what we were able to do, especially early on. And so for us, the kitchen became a better option. So the answer to your question is it can definitely work. And it really just comes down to, do you have a food truck partner or partners? There's several of them that are patient, meaning they know they're not going to hit it out of the park every single time that they're in your place. If they're on a Tuesday night, they can't expect to have $1,500 in sales unless you have a tap room that's booming. Then you don't have that problem anyway. You probably don't even need to have a food truck if you didn't want to. But I think you need to have a good partner that's patient, and that's hard for a food truck to accept, because if they can go somewhere else and make more money, they will and should do that. And so for us, it was not a sustainable option. And I know some other breweries that are local to me that have that as an option. It didn't work well for them either. But again, there are some that it does work for.
To Bats McGee's point, that was just put up, Metazoa near me, they have a permanent food truck. They're actually on I want to say their third permanent food truck right now, but they've been open for quite a few years. So
I feel like that's the opposite of the word permanent.
I know, but
Right.
rather than getting a new one each day, it's been there for several years. But their thing is that they also have a dog park, and in Indiana, you can't bring dogs into restaurants. So you have the food truck, it's outside, it's not a restaurant. You can bring dogs in. They have the dog park. They got a few condo complexes across the street now. So it's perfect for the uppie crowd, whatever the uppie crowd it would be. That's from my day. I don't know what they're called now. But they can get, an apartment dog, a condo dog. And
the hipsters,
take it to the dog
hipsters,
park.
as they say.
Yeah, something like that. So,
my opinion on that is it just depends on your situation. I think in that case, it really does come down to what licensing is allowed in your state and municipality. Some municipalities are probably just fine with you having a permanent food truck as long as you're going through the same health department licensing that you would if the kitchen was inside your building. Some aren't okay with that. It really comes down to what you are allowed to do. A brewer that I know, Doug, that owns Rustic Leaf, he does that right now. He's got a food truck right out back, and his landlord was going to tell him he can't put it there anymore, and they were going to have to close it down. So there's things like that too that could be completely out of your control. You actually have this good setup, and you have this thing that's working, and something else happens, right? So there's a lot of things that play into. You can't just say, "Oh yeah, seems like a good option. I'm just going to go do that." It might be a good option for you, but you have to know all of those things. Like I said, in Doug's case with Rustic Leaf, he had a good option. They were there for multiple years with this food truck, and then one day his landlord's like, "Nah, can't be there no more. I don't want it there." And so, luckily he was able to work it out eventually. But when you get a peek at how quickly a revenue stream of yours might be taken from you, especially when you're a small business, that's pretty scary to know how quickly and easily it can be removed. So knowing your local ordinances, licensing, all the things, plus is your landlord okay with it if you have one? If it's your own property, do you have the right liability insurance in place for serving food? It's not just sling burgers out of the back from a grill, right? I'll just be back there making hamburgers, and so it's not that simple. I wish it was, I definitely wish it was, but it's just not the case. So in some cases, that might be the answer. It just depends on your situation. And what I would say is that most situations, that is not the answer.
Well, you've talked about the fact that breweries that are new don't really have much of a laneway to get started. Like they need to come out the gates running as fast as possible. They have maybe 1 or 2 batches to get it right before people write them off. You mentioned that they need to have, food on premise, but what about like location? What about, shtick or a culture? Like what would a new brewery in 2025 need to do to have staying power?
Yeah, I think so. The hard thing is about all the stuff that you just said is that usually requires some level of experience to know what works and what doesn't work. So if you are brand new to the industry and you haven't run a restaurant or you haven't run a brewery or you don't have any marketing experience or whatever, I think it's going to be a difficult path to pave. And hopefully you got a good money guy that is okay with shelling out cash while you figure it out. But I think for folks that are thinking about getting into this and trying to navigate what you can and you can't do and all of those kinds of things, it's tough to say. So outside of good beer and a food program, hang on, I think my son's coming to say goodnight.
That's the benefit of live recording, not in
Yes,
studio.
I know.
Oh, no.
Quick, say hi to everybody. All right. Good night, bud. Love you.
Bye.
All right. So, anyway, when you have so again, you need food program and good beer. You talked about whether it's a shtick or some type of brand recognition is huge. Marketing is probably something that most small businesses in general, not just breweries, just can't afford to do the right way. And so coming up with a theme is difficult, especially because a lot of people when they think of a theme, they think it can kind of pigeonhole you, but it's not the case. Brand recognition is important, and really sticking to it can be a good thing. It's not an easy task. I'm not saying this like, oh yeah, everybody can do it. So when you have no time on your hands to do proper marketing, especially with how important social media is nowadays, and trying to execute presence and getting information the right way that people want to see it, it's extremely difficult to navigate that without any experience at all. And I would say if you do not have experience doing any one of those things, whether it's production brewing, a good food program, a good marketing plan, you need to figure out who to talk to that can help you do that. Doing it on your own, you're going to end up just not doing it at all, or doing it not properly. I remember a few years back at the Brewers Conference, Joe Short, who's the owner of Short's Brewing, he did a marketing session at the conference. Like, here's what you do, here's what we did, here's the things that we work on. And his audience is generally people like myself. Breweries that are small, don't have a lot of tools in their toolbox to execute this kind of stuff. And at one point during the session, he goes, yeah, so I have my video team. They do this every week. And we're like, video team? My iPhone's the freaking video team. Like, we don't have a video team. So I actually went up to him afterwards and I said, hey, I'm sure this was just like a general presentation, but most of us don't have a video team. I'm like, and you opened in the early 2000s when social media wasn't even a thing yet. So what did you do then? Like, what kind of and his answer then was more candid and what I wish he would have said during the session. He goes, you do whatever you can. And I think that carries to this day. Like, you see Joe Short when he's like this goofy dude that like does some weird stuff during like almost stunts during some of their social media. Like they'll have him water skiing, holding up a beer, and it's and so you can see that even though now he's got more tools in his toolbox, being one of the bigger breweries in the state of Michigan, he still does whatever you got to do, and so that's something that is more difficult now than ever, because whatever you got to do needs to be done through Facebook for a certain generation. It needs to be done through Snapchat for a certain generation, Instagram, Twitch. You got all these different platforms in which you're trying to get your product out there, and they all have different algorithms on what works and what doesn't. And so it can be pretty difficult trying to do that just on your own. I mean, just look at the top of your screen right now. Look how many there are. Like, that's hard to navigate.
We don't have blue sky up there yet.
Yeah, that's hard to navigate that many social media platforms and be good at it. It's hard to do. And I would say that we never really got to that point in our marketing. Like we tried our best, but we never got to a point where I felt like, man, we're just crushing it with whatever it is we're doing, and it's just hard to do. So
did you try getting more out of your video team?
Yeah, you just got to really push them. You got to really push to get the video guys to get more content for you.
So before we end each and every show, we like to ask a fun little question before we send everyone off. Like your son, I have an early bedtime tonight. I have to drive all the way out to the east side of the state for a bowling tournament for my high school kids. So I am up and out at 5 a.m. So before we get to those fun questions, I have one question. Hindsight is always 2020. What do you wish you could tell yourself 10 years ago?
Whatever you could have done to start that kitchen when you first opened, I wish I would have done that. I wish I would have just figured it out from the start. I think that could have put us on a different trajectory. It would have given us more stay power at the beginning. There's a lot of things over the course of almost 10 years that you could have probably done differently here or there. That's the one that sticks out to me the most, that I wish I would have just figured that out sooner.
It wasn't get a different point of sale system.
No, our point of sale system and our initial installation was beautiful. Worked up and all the way to the end.
That's right. You were a full customer from 2015 to you had some of that old legacy hardware. Every time I'd walk in there,
they replaced it for me for free.
They're probably like, just get this away from us. For those of you that don't know, especially if you haven't listened to some of the very early episodes of Better on Draft, and I'm talking like episode 8 or 2 or 4, somewhere around there. But that's actually how we got introduced to Kevin. I went over there to install. They were cheap and paid for a remote installation over the phone and couldn't figure the shit out. So I had to drive out to Northville to help them out. But let's get some fun questions to end this, not make it too doom and gloom of a conversation. Rob, what's your final question for Kevin over here?
I don't think it's doom and gloom, but we'll try it. So what is the next piece of North Center apparel that either will wear out or you will be told has worn out by someone dear to you?
Well, you can see I have this hat on right now, this winter cap. And oddly enough, we were at this Christmas light thing just before here, and there was someone that recognized me. They're like, "Oh, you're the owner from North Center. I know hope all is well," that kind of thing. And then the guy that was singing in the one warming tent, he was a guy that used to play at the brewery, and I said hi to him. Honestly, I do have a couple of shirts. Every year we had our anniversary, we released a shirt. So we had a 1, a 2, a 3, 4, or whatever, and I think we stopped at 7. Just because I was like, I'm sick of making these things. But I don't have any 1 or 2 shirts left. Those don't exist for me anymore. But I have like 2 or 3 shirts with 3 on them. So it would have been from 2018. That is the piece of apparel that my wife will remove from my dresser one day. It'll just be gone because it's essentially disintegrating.
Wendy,
what is the favorite beer you're drinking right now?
That's a good question. So I will say that I've had a good time. Some of my good friends in the industry still. I do like to, so it's not necessarily a singular beer, but places that I like to be to drink beer, if that's okay to answer it that way.
Sure.
But I enjoy going to Loaded Dice in Troy and Batch Brewing in Detroit. Those are my two spots that I frequent a good amount. Drafting Table in Wixom's also. I've always loved those guys. But those are the places that I enjoy. Their products are usually, you know what you're going to get when you get in there, and I just usually enjoy myself at those places.
Nice.
All right, my final question for you. You competed in every single variation of March Draftness. How come you never won?
Oh man, I'm surprised that question hasn't come sooner. To be honest, I'll be very honest with you. I was mad that we never took home hardware in that competition. It was something that it wasn't for lack of trying. I'll tell you that much. I mean, you talk about you unturn every stone. You reach out to old high school buddies. Hey, I need this vote. Can you do this? And I mean, all out. And you're doing what killed us. I think what killed us, because a lot of these votes are coming down to the last minute, right? They're tallying, and we're down by 20 or we're down by 30. Our tap room didn't open until 5 p.m. on every single weekday. If we went up against someone who opened up at noon or 1 or 2 or 3 or anytime before 5, they were having whoever's in the tap room, get on your phone, go vote right now. And I think that's what always ended up killing us, because some of those later rounds, you're going up against breweries that are getting votes constantly, and you got to be just constant with it. And when we didn't have that, I have this automatic 30, 40 people sitting in my bar to just get me over that finish line. We could never get over that finish line. Brewery 424, they were the ones that I think I had the biggest battle with. They were so good. That one like made me mad that we couldn't win because I thought I had it, and we again turned every stone, and we went nuts to get every vote, and they just beat us into submission.
We love putting on the March Draftness every single year, and it's always great to see the fun little rivalries that come out of it, and two, what we like to see is a lot of smaller breweries get the chance to kind of not necessarily be that underdog, but get a chance where everyone's like, what's a Coopersville Brewing? What's a Niles Brewing? Where are these places? Where's Coopersville?
Yep.
So when we had the opportunity, thank you to, and as sadly they're about to close here soon, Arctic Circle Brewing, when they had won, they invited Coopersville to come to their facility for the keg giveaway, and we interviewed Coopersville over there. So had a blast. For those of you who are wondering, March Draftness, I'm guessing will still go on after I am gone. So don't worry about that. We'll still be running the competition, going over somewhere and buying a keg of their beer. With that in mind, Kevin, what are you doing now? Can we find you anywhere? Can we, are we going to see you out in the world? Are you helping other breweries? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely in a behind the shadows type role. Always keeping in touch with the brewing industry, with the guild, trying to see if we can get some discussions surrounding this downturn that we're going through. And talk about it. It's not just a blip or a market correction. This is a real market issue that we're competing up with. So I think for me, it's right now it's just making sure that I can help my friends navigate based on making sure you candidly have conversations. No one likes to see their dream come to an end. But as I've said this a few times to people, don't be forced to close. I mean, yeah, in a way I was forced to close because I had all these things happening. But try to make it on your own terms. as best that you can. I know that's not an easy thing, but I always, when businesses close, statistically it'll be a failure, right? Because unless you're open forever and ever and ever, whenever you close, you are a business failure in statistics. So no matter what you do, you're going to become a fail statistic. But I always tell people, I didn't fail, I closed. And try to make sure you have that distinction, make sure you have an exit strategy, because there is life after brewery, no matter what age you're at or anything like that. And yeah, did I want my son to be the heir apparent to North Central Brewing? That would have been awesome. But that didn't happen. That's not how it worked out. And he seems okay about it too. Like, he didn't lose any sleep. You saw him; he just was down here. He's having a good time. His life is good. And so, for me, I'm just making sure that there is awareness of our current situation. Okay, it is not something that should be taken lightly, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Of what the trends are. So that's what I'm doing right now, is I'm trying to help my friends make sure they navigate and understand all of their options that are on the table and make the right decision for their particular situation.
I think it's important to also note that as a brewery / restaurant, like the term failure, especially within that industry, like if you're making it, more than 2 years, like you've made it, like you've passed the higher than like 60-70% of other restaurants,
Yep.
Breweries, bars, etc. So I think you definitely had a great run. We appreciate you coming on the show. I think you also got your your biography or your future book called Life After Brewery. I think that's going to be a number one seller for sure. But thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciated getting out here at the Friday night still. But that's going to do it. Better on Draft. Find us on all of the social medias, as Kevin and his video team told you about: TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Untapped, YouTube, Kick, Twitch, X, Blue Sky. Find us all at Better on Draft. And no matter what you think of your beer, we think it's Better on Draft. Have a good night.
Cheers.